you all for coming. I do think we're going to have at least one more person join us, but we'll just let them silently come on. I'm going to mute everybody. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. We're a small enough group that we can, you know, we don't have to raise our hands virtually. I just also want to say this is our last session for this particular colloque class. And I want to thank Rabbi Berkowitz in advance before we start for doing this with us. And we've become sort of a little community of our own, which is so nice because, you know, with distance, we can become a community without boundaries in Israel and Philadelphia, Detroit, so nice. And we want to usher in Shavuot, which is coming up, you know, just around the corner. So thank you. And I'm sorry, say that again. Andy, do you want to say something?
Oh, no.
Okay. So I'm going to mute everybody and we'll start. Anyone have any questions? Okay.
Super. Thank you, Adina. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, hopefully the connection will be great from Israel, but if not, if at any point you can't hear me well or the connection isn't good, then we'll just take a few seconds for me to log out of my computer and then log in again through my phone. So let me first share with you that I had the great opportunity and gift of taking 4 rabbinical students out on a hike this morning, just outside in the Jerusalem hills. So I share that with you in the spirit of what Audrey was sharing before. I know Audrey and Andy, you're going to have a beautiful outing for lunch today. So it was very, very exciting, I feel, to go out with my rabbinical students on a 3-hour hike in the Jerusalem hills, just along the highway. We were following the story of Israel's War of Independence. So it was an amazing, amazing hike. And then we came back to the Shokin Institute, the Shokin Library, for a celebratory lunch together. So it felt very, very good that we could end the year on the right foot. And here we are wrapping up our 4 learning sessions on the right foot as we complete Megillat Ruth just in time for Shavuot. And we will make sure you've got plenty of time to bake your cheesecakes or fry your blintzes. Who can remind us where we were at the end of the 3rd chapter? Or what was the action of the 3rd chapter? So we could set the scene going into 4th chapter. Skipped a week. Andy, you want to remind us? I see you gesticulating there. We just have to take Andy off of mute.
From what I remember 4, but I didn't go back to 3. Boaz was going to, with his redeemers, the Redeemer and the group, to begin the process of making a future relationship with Ruth. And Naomi had helped Ruth set the stage in a way for her future with Boaz. And that involved going to the field and being in the right place and setting
Fantastic.
the stage.
Great, Andy. So you remember from chapter 3, we had this very, very risque episode between Ruth and Boaz on the threshing floor. And then at the very, very end of chapter 3, Ruth returns to Naomi, right? Again, remember how the book ends of begins in their home and ends in their home, begins in their solitude, it ends in their solitude. But at the very, very end of chapter 3, Naomi says to Ruth, sit tight, Boaz is going to solve this. Right, and then it segues into the action, Andy, that you're talking about, which is the encounter with the Redeemer, right? That is the kinsman that is closer to Naomi and Ruth, and that has the potential to bring the action forward, right? But ultimately, right, that's going to collapse. Okay, so now let's jump into chapter 4 with that knowledge. I also want to say, for the last 20 minutes or so, I know Brendan and Dina sent out an email. I want each of you to share a highlight of learning that you're taking away from this course session. Okay, so we're going to turn to your voices, and you'll each have about 3 minutes each to share some highlight or piece of learning, or to think about who has been the Ruth, Naomi, or Boaz in your own life. Okay? So, chapter 4. Right, here we are at the last chapter of Megillat Ruth, the Scroll of Ruth, and it moves from a world of women to a world of men. This transition has often been criticized, assumption of what is called the patriarchal slant. But what seems like a public world dominated by certain men is also, we know at this point, it's a facade for the work of women behind the scenes. Boaz appears as a free agent, but in fact, he's functioning as a willing agent of Naomi and Ruth. Also, a very, very interesting observation that I read on the openings of the various chapters of the book of Ruth. Chapter 2 opens with Ruth taking the initiative. Chapter 3 opens with Naomi as the protagonist pushing the action forward. And now with chapter 4, we turn to Boaz, who's moving the action along. Chapter 4 is divided essentially into 3 parts. First, verses 1 through 12, which are the negotiations at the gate. We'll call it Redeeming Ruth. Number 2, or part 2, the betrothal, birth, and blessings, which are verses 13 through 17. And finally, the epilogue of the chapter, verses 18 through 22, reweaving the web of life, we'll call it. And that's the concluding genealogy that we find at the end of Ruth. Okay, so let's turn to the actual verses, page 1746 in the JPS edition of Tanakh, and we read the following. Uvoz Allah hashar, vayeshev sham, v'hine hagoel over asher diber Boaz. Meanwhile, Boaz had gone to the gate and sat down there. And now the Redeemer whom Boaz had mentioned passed by. He called, "Come over and sit down here, so-and-so." And he came over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 elders of the town and said, "Be seated here." And they sat down. Okay, so I want to begin with this image of the Shar, the city gate. Right? What do we know about the city gate? So I want to ask Ronnie, Ronnie, if you could share screen the presentation that I put together on the city gate. I want to show you a few slides about the ancient biblical city gate and the significance of that city gate. So in the JPS commentary on the book of Ruth, it states the following. The town's gateway, equivalent to the later town square, was the locale in the ancient world where people, typically men, congregated for commerce and other exchanges such as news. In addition, it was where authorized leaders met to conduct legal proceedings and decide on official matters. Thus, Deuteronomy situates the lawsuit before the elders at the gate. Likewise, the prophet Isaiah denounces corruption at the city gate. Right? So the city gate is
Rabbi,
a very, very significant place.
If you had put it in slide mode, then we could
Yeah,
get
yeah,
a
yeah.
better.
I'm going to, I was just doing the introduction. Thank you, Eugene. Please go to slideshow, Ronnie, and play from start. Thank you. Okay, so that gate is a very, very important place. The initial slides that I'm showing you come from the city of Megiddo. Okay, those of you who have been to Israel may have been to this archaeological site, a tel in northern Israel, right near Beit She'arim. It's an exquisite archaeological site, many, many archaeological findings there. The place itself, I mentioned, is called Megiddo, and the name or historical event that we call Armageddon comes from Megiddo, okay? That's where the battle, the final battle on earth is going to be fought, as it were. So here you have an image of what the city gate of Megiddo looked like. Now, the city gate has come up before in the book of Ruth. When we spoke about the threshing floor. The threshing floor for most biblical cities was located right by the city gate. Okay, if you could go to the next slide, Ronnie. Thank you. There we have an up-close illustration of what the city gate of Megiddo looked like. And I think this is a great image to have in mind as we go forward into this 4th chapter. The action that's going to play out at the beginning of this chapter played out right here at the city gate. And this was a very, very typical city gate. So this is what I want you to have in mind. Okay, the next slide. Right, there's a model of what Megiddo looked like, right? And there toward the right-hand corner, you see that city gate. And next, okay, and this is what it looks like today. Okay, the actual archaeological site and remnants that you see. This is the area of the gate looking out onto the Jezreel Valley in the north. I hope that one day I will be able to do this all with you in person. My hope of hopes, right? And then what you're looking at here is the archaeological site of Chatzor and its city gate, right? Specifically the city gate that goes into the larger city. Okay, the next slide. Perfect. Okay, good. Okay, so we can take it off of share screen now. Thank you. It just so happens, as it were, that the Redeemer passes by as Boaz is sitting by the city gate. Okay, not coincidence, obviously. Again, this very, very strong sense that God is moving the action along. Just like when we read the scroll of Esther, right? So too here in the book of Ruth, we have this sense that, even though the narrator wants us to believe that things are happening, coincidentally, or, that Ruth and Naomi are setting everything up. We know well that there's this sense of Etzba Elohim, that God's finger is pushing all of the action forward, right? And so too here, it's no coincidence that the Goel, the Redeemer, right, the closest kinsman, is walking by as Boaz happens to be there. And Boaz calls out to him, Ploni Almoso, come over here and sit down, right? I've got something that I need to talk to you about. So what are we to make of the fact that this Redeemer is nameless? How do you understand that? Marilyn?
It seems to me that if nothing else, it's a way to preserve this guy's anonymity, because maybe he doesn't look so good he's all agog to take the land, but since it's encumbered with Ruth, for some reason, which I don't know enough to be able to say from the hint in the text, but for some reason, this impairs his own estate. Maybe it threatens the legitimacy of his own kids to be sequential heirs or something like that. I don't know. But whatever it is, we don't know who he is, so he doesn't have to be embarrassed by
Excellent, Marilyn. Okay, so one possibility we have, Megillat Ruth is teaching us derech eretz. It's teaching us merit, right? And how so? Because as you're pointing out, Marilyn, Ploni Almoni, Mr. So-and-so, doesn't end up looking so good in all of this. He's ready to take the wealth. He's ready to take the property, the riches. But as soon as it's complicated, Marilyn, by this business of Ruth coming along with the estate, then he takes 2 steps back and realizes that he can't go ahead with Boaz's proposal. Okay, so perhaps that's how to understand the anonymity of the kinsman. Okay, we don't want to. So Torah is coming to teach us menschlichkeit. Okay, is there another edition of this? Is there another reading that we have of the anonymity, the non-mention of his name? Audrey, you got to take yourself off mute.
I wasn't on. I didn't think. I'm trying to find it.
Right, yeah, we can hear you now.
You're okay.
Yeah, it's because I had it on. Anyway, it could also be that as a group, all the redeemers, in a sense, were saying to Boaz, it's your baby, not ours. We'll go away. They were just walking away from it.
That they were sensing Boaz's strong interest.
And let him have it and we'll walk away.
Okay, very good. Okay, and how would that connect to the fact that we don't know his name?
Well, I think it makes it stronger. That is in unity saying it's yours, we'll walk away.
Okay.
So it didn't matter who the individuals were, the group walked away.
Okay, so this character is going to remain nameless because he sort of falls by on the periphery of all of this. He's not so important. It's Boaz who's important, right. And it's Boaz's desire. Okay, good. Yeah. Excellent. Andy. Okay, you got to take yourself off mute. And Audrey, to put yourselves on mute so we can hear Andy clearly. Okay. Good.
So my guess is, though, sometimes when people want to do something that is challenging in the decision making, but they don't want to stand up and be associated with it. So his being nameless then, and the group, as Audrey said, making the decision, all right, then no one has to bear the brunt of the responsibility of the decision. When there's no person whose name is associated with it, then they don't have to get blamed for the decision that was made. So they're, I guess, protecting themselves in a way for a decision that is challenging. It's the right decision, but it's challenging. And if people know who said what, or it gets out that somebody was responsible for that decision, it could hurt their reputation and their status in the community.
Okay, good. So perhaps it's acknowledging the gravity of the situation as you're pointing out, right? And we want to protect this person's identity, essentially. Eugene, you've got something you want to contribute here.
Yeah, I think if I may, there's 10 witnesses, or there's a number of witnesses, the elders. So this is a public thing. I mean, it's not like it's totally private. Key people know what's going on here. So his name's not mentioned in the story, but it's clearly recorded that this happened.
Right. Okay, good. So key people in the proceedings know who this is, right? But going forward, obviously, we, the audience, the later generations, right, are not privy to his name. I want to share with you the commentary that appears in the JPS. Some rabbinic sages, as well as modern scholars, suggest that not naming implies measure for measure justice, what we call midah keneged midah. The one who refuses to preserve the name of a kin deserves to have his own name vanish. Very, very interesting.
Interesting.
Right? So this Perush, this commentary, is actually punishment on this character. Because he refuses to rise to the occasion. Others argue that the narrator may wish to protect him from the embarrassment, which we spoke about, resulting from his inability or unwillingness to undertake responsibility for Ruth and Naomi. Campbell, who reviews the various proposed explanations, rightly concludes none is satisfactory. Some rabbinic sources suppose that the man's name was Tov, right? We
Good.
saw it, right? I mentioned this in chapter 3, verse 13. The Targum, however, has you whose ways are secret. The same notion is reflected in some Septuagint manuscripts as well as suggested by Rashi. Rashi also explores the etymology from Alman, right? In the Hebrew, it's Ploni, Almoni, Alman, which means widower and a mute, a reference to the man's lack of awareness that exclusion in Deuteronomy 23:4 applies solely to males. Okay, so all very interesting points about the anonymity of this character. So Boaz takes 10 elders. Obviously, that reminds us of a minyan, right? The community coming together, right? And says, be seated, they sit down. Verse 3, he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, now returned from the country of Moab, must sell the piece of land which belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. I thought I should disclose the matter to you and say, acquire it in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. So what is the surprise of what I just read here? Audrey, take yourself off mute.
That Naomi owned the land.
Excellent. Okay. We were given the impression,
She had
when they
nothing.
returned very good, Audrey. We were given the impression that she was destitute, right? She didn't have anything to. Welcome, Sandy. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. So we had no clue that she was a landowner, and here all of a sudden in chapter 4, it's telling us that this totally new development that that she's got this piece of land that needs to be dealt with. Okay, Frederick Bush in his commentary writes the following. He says the first statement introduces a totally new complication in the story, a complication that creates confusion and incredulity for modern readers, consequent upon the great temporal and cultural distance that separates us from the customs involved. This complication, however, would have created a stir of knowing and enjoyable surprise on the part of the original hearers of the story, for suddenly the patrimony, the ancestral land of the line of Elimelech has surfaced, as they must have felt it would. For the people of that culture, the question of what would have happened and would happen to the family land of a substantial citizen like Elimelech must have been one that was constantly in the background of their thoughts and concerns as they heard the story. So without a single word previously on the subject, our narrator has Boaz inform the nearer Redeemer that Naomi is surrendering her rights to the usufruct of Elimelech's land, rights that she enjoys as the widow of the deceased. Okay, so this is the great surprise here. All of a sudden we discover that she has a claim to this piece of land, and Boaz turns to this Redeemer and says, if you are willing to redeem it, redeem. But if you will not redeem, tell me that I may know. For there is no one to redeem but you, and I come after you. And so, I am willing to redeem it. Okay, and then Boaz continues.
Matt, you're getting choppy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just repeat yourself again so that we can
Sure.
we miss you.
Sure. Okay, so after Boaz mentions this land, is that okay, Adina? It's good? Okay,
Yeah.
after Boaz mentions this piece of land, he turns to the Redeemer and says, right, it's now in your court. And the Redeemer jumps and says, I am willing to redeem it. Boaz continues and adds an important caveat. When you acquire the property from Naomi, you must also acquire the wife of the deceased so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon this estate. The Redeemer replies, then I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own estate. Take over my right of redemption, for I am unable to exercise it. Okay, So what I want you to see here is, number one, Boaz is very selective about the information that he's sharing with the Redeemer. Right? He's setting up the scene, almost setting up a trap for this poor guy. Right? He's talking up the wealth, the estate, the property that this guy's got, and the guy jumps and says, wait a moment, there's fine print here that you need to be aware of. Not only are you acquiring the property from Naomi, but you're also acquiring Ruth. And once again, notice how Ruth is called here. It's not just Ruth, but it's Ruth HaMoaviyah, Ruth the Moabite. You need to acquire this stranger, as it were. Okay, so one more. So Tamara Ashkenazi points out the following, based on the response of the kinsman when he says, I cannot lest I impair my own estate. For the other man now realizes that buying the land would be a foolhardy investment. Sooner or later, the land will revert back to Elimelech's proper heir, who Boaz is now taking as his wife. The narrator portrays the unnamed Redeemer as an ordinary, decent person, not as a villain. Like Orpah, he seeks to do the right thing, but eventually gives up, thereby serving as a foil for the greater magnanimity of the story's heroes. Now, I love that comparison, right, to Orpah, because remember, in chapter 1, Naomi urges Orpah and Naomi to go back to their, Orpah and Ruth to go back to their mother's homes in Moab, right? And ultimately, Orpah accedes to Naomi's request, right? And ends up going back. The important thing is, Orpah does nothing wrong, right? She respects the request of her mother-in-law. Here it's in a way similar to what's happening. Like Orpah, he seeks to do the right thing. One rabbinic midrash advances this sympathetic view, capitalizing on the ambiguity of the verb acquire and responding to both senses. This midrash explains that the other man, as a gentleman, to act as redeemer in order to help Boaz. Okay, so Audrey, I think you were saying that before, right? That's part of what the redeemer was doing here. He understood that Boaz had deep interest in, right, in this relationship with Ruth, right? So he was respecting Boaz's wish. According to another midrashic opinion, however, the unnamed redeemer reneges because of Ruth's Moabite status. That's why I accentuated the point that the text makes here in calling her Ruth HaMoaviyah. Rabbi Shmuel castigates him for being ignorant in matters of Torah, for he should have known that the halakha interprets the passage as excluding only Moabite men, not Moabite women. Okay?
Wait,
So,
Matt, can you repeat that again? It got a little choppy, that last sentence.
yes. So the last interpretation here, Rabbi Shmuel castigates him for being ignorant in matters of Torah, which forbids marrying Moabites, right? Only excludes Moabite men, but not Moabite women, right? You remember this from chapter 1.
How convenient.
Bit of a stretch, but nonetheless, I wanted to refer to that. Bottom line is that he only seems to care, he only seems concerned about his own interest here. Okay. The text goes on, verse number 7. Now this was formerly done in Israel or exchange. To validate any transaction, one man would take off his sandal and hand it to the other. Okay, before we go on, okay, what I want to say here, notice that the narrator puts in a comment here. Okay, a comment which is telling us that people the story on they have no idea that's being spoken about. So the narrator comes in and says that in the past in Israel, now from the standpoint where we are, right, you don't know from this, you don't understand it. Okay, very, very interesting that this, such was the practice in Israel, so that when the Redeemer said to Boaz, acquire something, and Boaz said to the elder witnesses today that I am acquiring from all that belonged to failure, also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Machlon, as my wife, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate, that the name of the deceased not appear from among his kinsmen and from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today. Okay. Ronnie, I need your help. If we can go to the Deuteronomy passage. Right, there are many commentators that want to connect this to the whole ritual of levirate marriage. Okay, we're opening this text in Deuteronomy chapter 25 now. I want you to see it with your own eyes, because I want you to see that the comparison to levirate marriage is not a perfect one to the situation that we have confronting us here. Okay, so if you could open that, Ronnie, go to the actual text. Pull it up so we can see it large on the screen. Put your pointer on the text, which is on the right side. Click on it.
Do you see it?
No, because you need to click on it. We only see your desktop right now. Okay, click on the actual text, which is on the right side.
It.
Double click here. Double click right there on Deuteronomy 25. Double click on that document. Go down.
No, I did. It's open on my thing. Let me just try it again.
Well, you're supposed to be, I mean, this is supposed to be showing your.
There you go. Double click right there.
I did.
Double click.
Okay,
I did.
Double click.
So Ronnie, go to the right. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing that we're seeing.
No, I did. I tried to open it up in the Word. I double clicked on it and it's not working.
Okay, then I'm going to try and share screen now. Let's see if I'm able to do this. Can you all see this?
Yes. With you, we can. Yeah.
Yes? Great.
Yes.
Okay. When brothers dwell together and one of them dies and leaves no son, the wife of the deceased shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother will unite with her. He shall take her as a wife and perform the levir's duty. The first son that she bears will be accounted to the dead brother. That is, that his name may not be blotted out in Israel. But if the man does not want to marry his brother's widow will appear before the elders of the gate. There you have the appearance of the gate, and declare, my husband's brother refuses to establish a name in Israel for his brother. He will not perform the duty of a levir. The elders of his town will summon him and talk to him. If he insists on saying, I do not want to marry her, his brother's widow will go up to him in the presence of the elders, pull the sandal off his foot, spit in his face, and make this declaration. Thus shall be done to a man who does not build up his brother's house, and he shall go in Israel by the name of the family of the unsandaled one. First of all, I want you to see that the responsibility of the levirate marriage devolves upon the remaining brother, right? So technically, this would be another son of Naomi. In the case of the book of Ruth, this anonymous kinsman is not one of the remaining brothers that's left, okay? That's number one. Number two, I want you to see how the discussion in the book of Ruth opens with the property in Deuteronomy, and then later on in Boaz's language, we see what is the point of levirate marriage. It has nothing to do with property or protecting those that are left behind, but rather what is the concern? It's so that his name may not be blotted out in Israel. You see that, the bold section, right? So that his name may not be, it's about perpetuating the name of the deceased. You just give me one moment. I just have to remind my daughter of one thing very quickly, because she's leaving for a second. Give me 1 second. Shira?
Can anybody tell me where we are in the book of Ruth? I came in late.
Approximately 7.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Approximately 7.
Chapter 7?
1747.
The 4th chapter, go down to 7.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so what I want to share with you, okay, Ronnie, you could take us, oh wait, it's me who's on share screen. I'm gonna take us off share screen, bring us back. Okay, so I want to share with you a couple of comments of Tamara Askenazi here. I am also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Machlon. One contemporary reader has opined that Boaz's marriage announcement must be one of the least attractive in Western literature. But in its own literary context, Boaz's declaration heralds a happy ending where everyone walks away content, satisfied that the right thing has been done and in the right fashion. Yet despite this happy ending, it is impossible to overlook the fact that Boaz's announcement stands in tension with Deuteronomy 23, verse 4, which unequivocally states that no Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. None of their descendants, even in the 10th generation, shall ever be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. It is noteworthy that Boaz divides his transaction into 2 separate legal formulations: the acquisition of the land and his announcement of marriage. The 2 are distinct and subject to different presumptions. Okay, and then this whole business of, I am also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Machlon, as my wife, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate, that his name may not disappear from amongst the kinsmen. This public justification for his marriage to Ruth stands in tension with Boaz's private promise to her at the threshing floor, when he identified her as his sole concern. Acknowledging his allegiance to community traditions, Boaz integrates his personal goal with larger communal values and thus diffuses potential objections to this marriage. Boaz's statement evokes liberate marriage in Deuteronomy 25:7. By claiming this as his goal, Boaz links his marriage to Ruth with the well-known values of preserving a man's line, name, and property beyond his death. Yet how is the marriage perpetuating the deceased name? That name, after all, will not appear in the concluding genealogy, which we're going to see at the very, very end of the book. And then in the Hebrew it says, lo yikaret, that his name not be cut off. The same phrase appears in Isaiah 56:5, where God promises certain eunuchs who are unable to procreate that God will give them an everlasting name. Do you know what this expression is in the book of Isaiah? Everlasting name. There is a very, very famous memorial in Israel, in Jerusalem, which takes its name from this verse in Isaiah. Sandy, you want to take a guess? You want to venture a guess? Take yourself off mute. I think you got it.
Yad Vashem?
There we go. Direct quote.
Okay.
Bar of the day. So Yad Vashem, okay, the Holocaust Memorial, takes its name from this verse in Isaiah 56, verse 5. Okay? which means an everlasting memorial, right? For those who do not have descendants to perpetuate their name, right? They are given a yad, literally a hand, and a name that is a euphemism for a memorial going forward, right? That their names will not be forgotten, and that's why Yad Vashem takes that name. So, verse 11, all the people at the gate and the elders answered, "We are. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel. Prosper in Ephrata," another name for Bethlehem, "and perpetuate your name in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman." Okay, so let's take this three-part blessing apart. Okay, may the Lord make the women, the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. What's the significance of saying that Ruth should be like Rachel and Leah?
Well, she becomes the foundation of Judaism.
Foundation of a line.
Eugene, can you say that again?
She becomes
By the way,
the foundation of Judaism, the same ranking of the other key women.
this is my daughter Shira, who's going off to ballet.
Goodbye. Have fun.
See Sandy? Bye, sweetie. Okay, have fun. Okay.
I was going to add that maybe it means that she's going to should procreate, be able to have children like Rachel and Leah did, to become their children being the foundation of what
The foundation
I
of
guess
the
it would
line.
be just that. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, good. So like you said before, Rachel and Leah being the foundation, a blessing that just like Rachel and Leah, Ruth should procreate, right? It's also very interesting to think about as well that Rachel and Leah, right, just like all of our matriarchs, right, had challenges conceiving. They wrestled with infertility.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Sandy, you want to give us another reason?
It's the 12, Rachel and Leah gave birth to the 12 tribes.
Well,
Yeah,
most
right.
of them.
Well,
But
right.
Leah didn't have a problem conceiving. She had a problem being loved.
No, she also has she also has difficulty conceiving.
Leah?
We know that because God has to intervene to open her womb. Okay, take a look at the text. Okay,
Well, I
it's
will.
very interesting. God opens her womb with the goal of making her loved, right? But ultimately, right, it's still very much a challenge. Malbim has another very interesting comment here, and says the following. Commenting on this verse, he notes Rachel and Leah's idolatrous origins as daughters of Lavan. Okay, very. Okay, just like Ruth comes from Moab, right? The Moabites, who are an idolatrous people, so too Rachel and Leah. Nevertheless, who built the house of Israel, so too should there be built from Ruth a faithful home. Second, commenting on the concluding genealogy, which he connects with transmigration of souls, Malbim interprets the reference to Rachel and Leah as part of David's defense of Moabite ancestry. All Israelites are the offspring of a union between a man and two sisters. In Ruth, the people and the elders understood that all of this deceit was necessary to bring forth precious souls from the hands of oppressors. Right? And also, so too, do we have the mention of Tamar, Peretz, who's born of the union of Tamar and Judah. What do we know about that story? Why is that mentioned here?
I don't know that.
Who can shed light on this? You remember, Tamar's husband dies, right? And so there's an actual case of levirate marriage where she's entitled to marry, right, the next brother of the deceased. The next brother of the deceased is a man by the name of Onan, right? And what does Onan do? Rather than impregnating Tamar, right, he spills his seed, right? That's where the term onanism comes from, right? He spills his seed rather than impregnating Tamar, right? Judah fails to give another one of his sons to Tamar, and then Tamar has to disguise herself. You remember, hopefully the story is coming back to you, right? Judah has no idea who this, that she's a prostitute, with her, and Tamar becomes pregnant from this relationship and ends up having the son Peretz, right? And that's how our Israelites go forward. Very, very interesting. So what's striking here is that this relationship is used as part of the blessing as well. Okay, so a very, very similar situation in a way, right? Of a brother who ends up deceased and the line needs to be perpetuated. So we're told in verse 13, Boaz marries Ruth. She became his wife and he cohabited with her. The Lord let her conceive and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age, for he is born of your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than sons." What jumps out at us from the passage that I just read when you think about the end of chapter 1, when the women returned to Beit Lechem?
They were empty. Oh, they were empty.
Excellent, Andy.
When they came. Right. And now look what has been the turnaround from the end of chapter 1.
Excellent. Okay, so these same women in the community who at the end of chapter 1 looked at Naomi and made this exclamation, Hazot Naomi, could this be Naomi? And you know, she says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, right? For God has brought me out of Beit Lechem, right, full, and I am coming back empty. So she is bitter at this point. Now those same women who greeted Naomi, right, there's this, you know, beautiful, beautiful reception in which they say to her, "Blessed be the Lord who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated. He will renew your life," right? That he will be Meshiv Nefesh. He will literally bring a soul back to you. Ulechalkel et sevatech, right? And he will sustain you in your old age. Okay, so all of a sudden, bracha is coming back to this woman who is empty. Her life is going to be full again. Commentary to share with you. Commenting on the fortuitous appearance of the would-be redeemer, the Midrash has God proclaimed, Boaz did his part, and Ruth did hers, and Naomi did hers. The Holy One said, I too will do mine. Right? The sequence of actions in Ruth, climaxing God's intercession only after the human protagonists have done their best, is one of many reasons why calling Ruth a human comedy is so apt. This phrase, a clear allusion to Dante's Divine Comedy, underscores the book's focus on ordinary human beings whose actions bring God's presence into the world. Right? And she bore the son. The birth of a son in the Bible typically signifies divine favor. This event could have served as the conclusion to the book, but as befits a tale about chesed, about loving kindness, the narrative does not stop here, but returns to the still vulnerable and bereft Naomi to address her plight. Like Ruth, the narrator does not forsake Naomi. as its climax, the book's conclusion lingers on the restoration of Naomi's life and lineage, surrounding Naomi with women who make her the center of their concern. The old childless widow, whose hopes have been dashed by life's severe blows, is not to be left behind. She now becomes the recipient of blessings as well as a progenitor. So Naomi takes the child in hand, holds it to her bosom. She became its foster mother.
Right.
And the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, "A son is born to Naomi." They named him Oved. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Okay, so Oved is the grandfather
Of King David.
King David, exactly, is the grandfather of King David. Okay, Frederick Bush has an interesting comment here. He says the following: "The resolution is perfect. Our story has come full circle. Death and emptiness have given way to life and fullness, and the vehicle our author uses to describe this transformation is appropriate in every way. The women of Bethlehem were those whose delighted cry of recognition triggered Naomi's little lament, 'Full was I when I went away, but empty has God brought me back.' Now they are the ones who describe in jubilant chorus the complete reversal of her tragic state and encapsulate her restoration in the happy description of the child as the one who brings back life." Having portrayed Naomi's return to life and fullness in such expressive speech, our author now depicts the same by painting for us a tender and moving scene. Naomi, the woman who was left alone with her two boys, now takes the boy, holds him to her bosom, and becomes the one who cares for him. In turn, this scene also triggers a response, not this time from the women at large, but from Naomi's neighbors. Exercising his poetic license, our author once again sums up this child's relationship to Naomi by having these women name him, basing their name on the semantic wordplay between who the child is, expressed in their delighted cry, "A child has been born to Naomi," and the meaning of the name Oved, guardian or provider, the one who will take care of her with all the solicitude incumbent upon a man for his grandmother. And then finally, this is the line of Peretz. Peretz begat Chetzron, Chetzron Ram begat Aminadav, Aminadav begat Nachshon, Nachshon begat Salmon, Salmon begat Boaz, Boaz begat Oved, Oved begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. So what is the purpose of this genealogy that we're granted at the end of the book here? Why do you think we're given this family tree here at the end? Audrey, I see the wheels turning.
In one sense, the acceptance now is complete.
Everyone else can go on mute because we're getting some feedback, an echo. Just
In a sense,
yeah.
in a sense, it's the completion of the acceptance and it's accepted part.
Okay, very good. Okay, so number one, there's the sense of acceptance of Ruth. Completing finally at the end of the tale, she's not called Ruth HaMoaviyah, right? She is Ruth. She is whole Ruth, a part of our people. Very good. Okay, another reflection on this genealogy, Marilyn. Audrey, just mute yourself, please.
I can't hear you.
If you could please mute yourself.
In a way, I think I see it differently. When they say a son is born to Naomi, the son is born to Ruth. Yes, it's in, the son is in Naomi's family, but to my mind, I've never liked this verse because it always seemed like it completely obliterated Ruth. She's simply a vehicle. It diminishes her status, in my opinion.
Right.
Yes, it gives her legitimacy on the one hand because she's along the way to give us David. But on the other hand, the real Israelite is Naomi, and the son is quote unquote born to her. So I have sort of an issue with this. Maybe that's just me and my own genealogy. What can I say? But
I think it's a very, very interesting and appropriate reflection at this point. Tamara Askenazi in her JPS commentary wanted to say, she was looking at it to be dan lakaf zchut, to give the benefit of the doubt here, that what the text is doing is it's bringing Naomi back into the picture. Right? It wants to say that even at this moment, Naomi is not forgotten, right? That she is still going to be the center of the action and she's going to bring it forward. But at the same time, you're right. On some level, it does diminish Ruth, right? And say, it sort of pushes her to the sidelines, and the celebration seems to be all around Naomi at this point. JPS commentary points out a number of things here. Stylistically, the genealogy mirrors and reverses the prologue, which recorded the death of several men, right, which was at the beginning of the book. Thematically, by concluding with the birth of David, the book honors those whose efforts led to Israel's most illustrious king and dynasty. In particular, the book extols the women, the man who responded to their right, and the virtue of chesed, loving kindness, that made such a birth possible. Also, the double emphasis on David as the culmination of the book highlights David's threefold ancestry as son of Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz. And finally, it validates a union with a Moabite woman by splicing it into an all-male genealogy that normalizes and legitimizes it. Right, that last point dovetails perfectly with what Audrey was saying about the full embrace of Ruth at this point that we're feeling.
It was also
Right.
it was also the legal acceptance. So even though you in today's world would have compassion and feeling for Ruth, that wasn't part of the program 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago.
Right.
It was a different society.
Right. It's putting the stamp of approval on it at this point, Audrey. That's what's happening. Right. Two concluding remarks to share. One, Frederick Bush, and then we're going to turn to Tamar Frankiel, and then your voices, the most important voices that I want to hear. Frederick Bush, indeed, the loving commitment and obedience of Ruth to her mother-in-law, which transcended the claims of national origin and national religion, the sagacity of Boaz and his faithfulness to his family responsibilities to both Ruth and Naomi, which transcended the claims of self-interest, the concerning care of Naomi for the welfare of her daughter-in-law, which prompted the risky scheme on the threshing floor, and God's gracious provision of fruitfulness for field and womb, all have afforded home and husband for Ruth, the restoration of life and fullness for Naomi, and now we learn inestimable benefit for all Israel, for the son that has resulted from such faithfulness on the part of man and God was to be the grandfather of the great King David. And finally, Tamar Frankiel, who very beautifully writes the following. From this, we can begin to understand the possibility of redemption in our own day, to open at least one gate along the path to the Messiah. These traces of the history of redemption, which Ruth records for us, provide hints as to how to prepare for redemption. The model is chesed, kindness at every level and every opportunity. Particularly, Ruth reminds us to be mindful of chesed for the dead as well as the living, to honor the past generations. Each of our ancestors had a name, a lineage, a personal contribution to our tradition, which we too often belittle or neglect. As we rebuild Jewish life on the ashes of those who devoted themselves to Torah, as we have always rebuilt ashes, it is especially important to awaken this form of chesed in our own lives. Second, we can be returners, like Ruth and Naomi. If we have left to sow and reap in other fields, the fields of Moab, we can return. This means that the Jewish people must turn their faces toward one another like the angels on the ark. We can embrace one another in appreciation of our traditional way of life in the land of Israel. In this kind of turning and returning, we can learn the powerful practice of gratitude. Being for the life and sustenance we are given, for the kindnesses we receive from others, for the special qualities of the Jewish people and our land. Yet at the same time, we cannot focus only on what will be good for us, our family. Chesed, good in everyone, to do in all, outsider and insider alike, and to extend to all the. Third, and perhaps most difficult, is learn to relate to others with you, recognizing each person in our life as an agent of God, seeing everything that happens as a teaching from heaven. These lessons are sometimes harder to learn from strangers than friends, from spouses than strangers. Wherever our difficulties are, that is where we can learn most and where we most need to be grateful. The sense of divine direction we find in the book of Ruth can enter our lives. Our task is less driven by ego, more willing to do the will of the other. Practicing this level of kindness can open our hearts and can demand or can make the redemption of which we have so longed. For we too await a tikkun, repair, for those acts of long ago which sent their ripples of evil across the earth. The arrogant desire for power, wealth, comfort, and pleasure, which have given us war, pornography, and oppression. Like Ruth, we can take steps to generate this repair, this tikkun, in our own day. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. So I want to turn to you. I want to hear your voices. What for you was the highlight of the learning that we did over these 4 sessions? Who would like to begin? Who would like to be the Nachshon that jumps into?
Okay. For me personally, it was a return to some Jewish learning, which I have not done in a very, very long time. So it was exciting to look at the text, look at the root words, remember some of the things that I learned when I was in Hebrew high school. And the piece was to study something that I don't really remember looking at very much when I was in school, and looking at it with a modern eye and looking at it in respect to what was going on in our world, and remembering some of the things that were mentioned in the you just mentioned, and learning that reminding me to go forward to do good deeds, yes, chesed, and also to accept and look for the good in everyone that is around us and crosses our path. I think I was taught to do that, but in this crazy world, sometimes I'm not sure I always remember to look for the good in every single person that's out there, and to turn it around into a good deed, and to enjoy being with people, all kinds of people, and learning from them as much as maybe I can help them learn something. So that's what to me was the highlight of being in this class for the last, well, for me, 4 weeks.
Beautiful, Ted. Thank you, Andy. Thank you. Who else?
I'm also brave enough to say something. I found it very, very interesting as someone who's trained to be an engineer who would tell my teachers in high school, poetry, this is all nonsense. Why don't people say what they mean? Why do you sit there and come with all these interpretations? If the author meant it, he should have said it. So I guess as being older, I appreciate one, reading the Tanakh. To be honest, for me anyway, it's extremely boring because you have to delve into it as you did, Rabbi, and bring out all these different things. And so I find this very interesting because you're able to pull from all different places what is the meaning behind all of this. And for someone who's not trained language that way, more looking at formulas, if you will, I find it very interesting. And I also find, I think I mentioned this before, I think the dilemma for the Jewish people is you go to synagogue, which I do on Shabbos, I go to the morning minyan, you feel the rhythm, you like the melodies, etc., but you don't learn the message. And the message and the problem we have today with our youth, with our adults, is people aren't getting the message. And it's not tikkun olam. That's not the message. It's being kindness is the message. Doing the right thing is the message. But not, Judaism isn't tikkun olam like some people want to make it to be, or too many people want to make it to be. And so I think this is important, but I think the question is, and I don't have the answer, is how do you bring this down to the average person who is not coming to this seminar, that, if you will, the religion, I guess that's my comment. I really enjoyed this class. I thought it was very interesting. And people have your talent, Ralph. It's unique because you can make it come alive. How's that? That's my comment.
Thank you so much. Who's up? Audrey.
Yeah. I come from a different perspective. As I told you before, I probably am the least Jewish educated person in the group, and I understand that. But I came away learning things that I didn't know existed. In a sense, I knew the book of Ruth. I mean, I certainly have read the Bible enough times, but I didn't understand it in the same way. So it gives me a different perspective on Jewish education. Really, that's about it. I came to like studying. I didn't mind not knowing. I come from where I should go in and know something. I didn't object in myself going in and not knowing anything. And so I was pleased with myself in that respect. But you were able to bring that out. As I told you, I'm shocked at myself that I responded in ways. I'm a talker, but if I don't know something, I keep my mouth shut.
We loved having your voice in this group.
Thank you.
I'm delighted. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you shared. Marilyn.
Well, for me, Ruth, and I do have a Jewish education, but I have to admit, I didn't read it critically or asking these kinds of questions and really seeing the ambiguities in it. So this was great to have a close read, to look at problems in the text that I hadn't identified, didn't realize were there. I think I've sort of implied in these classes some of my ambivalence about the Book of Ruth. I am a naturalized Jew. So in a certain sense, and while I have all these with the book of Ruth, I've got more to think about, and that's a good thing. And I thank you, Rabbi.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marilyn. Sandy.
Rabbi, and I wanted to add one thing. I want to thank Audrey because she was the one who me and I had not even some Jewish study, and I would not have been able to enjoy it or be part of this or enjoy your teaching, which I think is phenomenal. Okay, and the fact that you're able to get us all to talk and we're not even sitting in the same room looking eyeball to eyeball, I think is magnificent. Okay, so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Audrey, for the gift of Andy. Thanks for bringing her along. And Sandy.
I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you for the first three, and I'm sorry I came late, but I enjoyed it. It's always good to hear something extra. I particularly like that last piece, even though you didn't say it, you just read it. I think in today's time, it's really very important. And I guess Ruth shows that, and I think every time you look at it, you see something different. I guess they say turn it and turn it, but it's really true. We're in a very different situation, and I think we see things here that I don't think I saw last year.
Absolutely.
Would you share that last piece that you read?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very sweet. As we close, I want to thank the Jewish Theological Seminary, which brought us all together. And I want to tell you a bit about JTS and why JTS is so important. I know that in many ways I'm preaching to the choir here. I know that I think all of you know about JTS, but I still want to make an important plug here and public service announcement. And since we've been talking about chesed and giving, remind you all how important it is to be giving. If you haven't made your gift to JTS, please do make your gift to JTS this year. Happening. It is so, so important to us. JTS, as you know, is the academic and spiritual center of conservative Judaism. We're located just north of Columbia University. And in fact, we were supposed to have a very, very celebratory and festive dedication of our new campus, which we were all looking forward to until COVID hit. As you know, this one of the casualties of this COVID curveball. But we will open, and we will open that campus with great joy. And we will also open with a new chancellor soon, very, very soon, as Chancellor Eisenstein. JTS is composed of 5 schools, 5 core programs. The Rabbinical School, the Cantorial School, the Davidson School of Education, the Graduate School, which awards masters and PhDs in a wide range of Judaic studies, right? And then finally, Liss College, which is our joint program with Columbia University, our undergraduate program. For the past 11 years, I have had the privilege of being JTS's Director of Israel Programs here in Jerusalem. I'm at JTS's campus in Israel, which is at the Shokin Library. It's a remarkable place, and next time you come to Israel, I would love for you to visit. Sandy knows us, and Sandy has been there. The Shokin Library is a gift of Zalman Shokin, Zichrono Livracha. He was a very, very successful businessman in Germany, had department stores all over the country. And between 1934 and 1937, he smuggled his collection of rare Hebrew books and manuscripts out of the country and built this building in Jerusalem as a refuge for his collection. Right, that collection came to us by way of South Africa. It was smuggled, went on this fascinating route, eventually came to Israel. He engaged the Bauhaus architect Eric Mendelsohn to design our building. And in 1937, that building was completed. In 1961, he gifted the building and its collection to the Jewish Theological Seminary. It's an amazing, amazing story. And next time you're in Israel, you have to come see the building itself, come see our collection. We will roll out the red carpet for you.
Buildings in Israel. Come on, Matt.
But we do have the first air conditioning system in all of Israel.
Wow.
So you got to come see that. It's quite remarkable. Obviously, the jewel in the crown of the campus in Israel and the campus at 3080 is our students. And that's the investment that you're making when you make that gift to JTS. It's investing in the future leadership of North America and beyond. It's investing in a Judaism of pluralism and a Judaism of chesed, of loving kindness. So be sure before the end of June you get that gift in, and I hope this is just a beginning for all of us, that we'll be able to continue our learning together. Adina and Brett, I want to thank you for being my partners in all of this. Thank you for when I made the offer to do this, you just ran with it immediately and got this study group off the ground. And this is just about the most geographically diverse group I have ever taught over Zoom. We've got Chicago, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Detroit all represented here. So beautiful to have you all and to get to know you all. Adina, I'll give you the last word here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You did a remarkable job. I know I've heard some feedback from people in the past few weeks, and I know everyone's been really thrilled to learn with you. And as have I, by the way, I had never learned with Rabbi Berkowitz either. So it's been a really, really nice opportunity. Thank you. Something good came out of the pandemic. Looking for those, silver linings. And I also want to say, dovetailing really nicely into what that last bit by Matt was, there's actually going to be a webinar, which is much larger scale than this small class. There's going to be lots of people on it. Rabbi Berkowitz is going to be teaching on Thursday, June 4th and June 11th at 12:30 p.m. on, it's going to be called Planting in Tears, Reaping with Joy, a virtual journey to JTS in Jerusalem. And he's going to go through the treasure trove of history, rare books and manuscripts at the Shokin Library. I will send, you'll receive an email about it. With all the details.
Remember all of that off the top of your head. We're going to follow up with that information.
Yeah. Right after this. Yeah. And I want to wish everyone a happy and healthy and wonderful Shavuot, and enjoy. And thank you again for coming. Brett, would you like to say anything?
You said it all, both of you. Yeah, thank you so much. It's really great learning. It's nice to break it up, have some absorbing some really great learning in the middle of the day, and it's good to see all your faces. So thanks again, and have a great Shavuot.